Good morning, everybody. Okay, so we're going to go over your confirmation bias, multiple choice practice results, and then I'm going to give you a quick reflection, which will be a daily grade. So at this point, as long as you're keeping up with all of the daily grades, they should be easy 100s to kind of help replace, especially if you have any zeros or low grades, especially towards the beginning of this grading period. So, here are some of my notes and just some observations looking at your results from each different class period. So, the most missed questions were really 1, 5, and 6. 4 and 7 were also some areas to look at in some classes, but these questions were based upon understanding audience, looking at claims and evidence. Number 6 was one that across the board in all of our classes was difficult to look at the thesis statement. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. But I can see where the confusion would be. And it's just a matter of redirecting your focus. The other ones, I think if you were rushing through them, you were going to pick a distractor rather than the best answer. And so I'll go over some of my observations in just a second. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see our class average. For 3 of my 4 classes, my class averages were 5 out of 8, which is a 63%. If you were going to pass this multiple choice practice, you needed to have a 6 out of 8 or higher. So there was one class that did earn a 6 out of 8, which is a 75% pass rate. So that's pretty good. I wouldn't say we're, in trouble in terms of the 5 out of 8, but I definitely think we've got some room for growth. And I know this time of year is difficult. I also know that, this is a different type of year. So we're getting there. Slowly but surely we'll get there. But I want you to look at the class averages and think to yourself about how what were your results? If you didn't get to take it at all, that's a concern, number one. If you got maybe a 4 out of 8, okay, at least we're getting some things. But if we're lower than the 4 or 5 range, then we really need to start scheduling some tutoring, or we need to start looking at maybe some different types of videos or some other types of interventions, just because we are already in December and you do take this exam in May. So consider what this means for you when looking at the questions you might have missed. So out of 1, 4, 5, 6, and 7, which ones did you miss? If it was number 6, and even number 5, that's understandable, but 1, 4, and 7, we definitely want to make sure we're looking at that. So here are my observations. For the essay multiple choice questions, anytime we do progress checks, I've noticed that these questions are a little bit lower in terms of our ability to get them correct. Remember that these passages for these types of questions are not published pieces. They are sample essays that are most likely in need of revision. So when you're evaluating your answer choices, you don't need to look for, these amazing responses depending upon what the question is asking. Now, I think about the thesis question on the confirmation bias piece. The thesis questions were awful. I mean, all of those examples were not any of the ones that I would consider a strong thesis statement for the passage. But again, it was a sample essay. It was not a published piece by a reputable author. However, if I were going to evaluate it like I did maybe with one of my peers in class, then I would try to look for what was done well in those passages, where it could look for improvement. So when you're reading it, you're not going to read the essay like you do read a published piece in terms of rhetorical analysis. You're going to read the essay like a peer evaluator or somebody who is scoring the essay to look for the things that are done well, to look at the things that in rhetorical analysis essay rubric, like the commentary piece, right? All of those different categories were separate. And so even if the thesis statement maybe wasn't, as clear in the passage, that doesn't mean it's not defensible, which would earn the point on the rhetorical analysis essay rubric. So that's something that you want to think of when you read the essay multiple choice questions. They're different than, reading a different piece for with a more critical eye. So that brings me to number 2. Don't forget the rubric. Remember, we've done a lot of work in looking at what constitutes the thesis point. Remember, it's pass or fail. And so there are other places in that essay that we read on the confirmation bias that I would argue was a better thesis. But out of the answer choices, I think it was maybe, A and whatever the correct answer choice were that I think were the best. But the first one couldn't have been justified because it doesn't mention confirmation bias versus the one that actually was, which was sentence 11, I believe. So to earn a point for your thesis, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be defensible. And so that was one of the skills that across the board that was missed. And I think it's because we were looking for a really strong thesis statement and not necessarily that it was defensible. So understanding the skills in the rubric isn't just for writing essays, it's also for evaluating them too when you do these essay multiple choice questions. It's always important to understand that when you take any sort of college board exam, you're looking for the best versus correct answer. So that is number 3, especially when it comes to reading. Now, this might not be the case for math, right? Because there is a correct answer in those kinds of fields. But for language, you're looking for the best or most effective rather than correct, because there are a lot of answers that you can justify as correct, right? That's what makes our subject so subjective anyway. So College Board is going to make you work for it. It's not going to be easy all the time. You do need to evaluate and justify your options. However, overthinking something equals doubt. And so I know for a lot of you, when you tend to overthink, you kind of tend to, you know, think your way out of the right answer or the correct answer. But overthinking is also a form of doubt and not understanding the skills. Have confidence in the skills that you know. When you're evaluating, you know what you know, okay? And so that's not to say, oh, I'm going to overthink this and try to justify this, that, and the other. No, think about it, evaluate, justify with the skills that you know how to do, and look for the best answer. And then lastly, focus on the skills. Okay, multiple choice questions are only worth 45% of the total exam score. Essays, so these types of multiple choice questions are meant to prove your knowledge of these skills. So know how to do, because you have 3 essays on the AP exam. So it's not enough to just know how to write them. You need to know how to evaluate them. Looking at the essays shows that you understand the rubrics, shows that you understand the components and all the skills that we're learning together. So this will help for everything. So even though essay, the multiple choice questions, not just essay questions, but all multiple choice questions are only 45% of the exam, they are a testament to whether or not you understand certain skills. So think about that as you're going to head to today's reflection. So those were just some of the things across the board out of all of my classes that I noticed to be what could be potentially holding you back. I'm also looking about how long you're taking on these 8 questions. And some of you are taking, 40 minutes for 8 questions, which again is probably not best. But then some of you are taking like 11 minutes. And that's also not enough time to read the passage and to truly and critically evaluate your answer choices. So you need to gauge, look at those observations again and figure out maybe where of those 4 you're missing the mark or you're forgetting when you're approaching some of these kinds of questions. So based on your personal results, so you can go back and look at the most missed questions. You could just go back and look at yours, read the descriptors for why you're getting answers right or wrong. But what AP composition related skill do you personally plan to focus most on when you do this again? And again, that comes to evaluations as well. So when you're looking at composition related skills, the ones I give you here are all composition related skills. In addition, you can always go to AP Classroom and pull up the assessment, and it will give you skills for every single question. So you can go back in and actually truly evaluate your results. This is a daily grade, so just making sure you're doing it. If you're BSing your way through it, it's going to be reflected in your grades, right? You earn 100 as looking like a truly exceptional reflection earns 100. If it's not even written in a complete sentence, I don't feel like that warrants, anything above an 85. So be mindful, I understand we're tired, but you're in an AP course for a reason. Okay, and you get 8 extra points on your GPA. So always remember that when you're coming to work through for your best efforts, right? We don't give grades, you earn them. And the same can be said for any question, whether it's a simple daily discussion board question or an essay. Okay, So we'll talk about these briefly via Zoom. If you would like to have a conference based off of your personal results, or if you want to ask a question in Zoom, please feel free to do so. So again, this reflection is a daily grade and also verifies your attendance for today. That is your attendance question. All right, folks, we're going to get ahead and start with synthesis tomorrow. So let me know if you guys have any questions, and I'll see you soon.